And here we have the screaming chicken in its natural habitat, surrounded by birds of a feather.
Hello and welcome to the JK Feather Ranch channel and what I hope to be the first of a multi-part series involving this 1998 Firebird here. I have always wanted one of these 4th Gen F bodies ever since probably since I saw one in the high school parking lot in the early 2000s. So what did I do about 5 or 6 years ago when I finally had some disposable cash burning a hole in my pocket? Why, I bought a Mustang, of course, because that's what I could find on Facebook Marketplace at the time. And my only real considerations were 8 cylinders and a top that went down. Since that's not what I actually really wanted, it goes without saying that I haven't driven it in a couple years. And I did tell myself that if I ever got to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, I would finally treat myself to a Firebird and hopefully make a little video series on it. So here we are. This is not going to be a performance build, mostly because of California smog requirements. I'm not sure if you'd really consider it a restoration either, because this thing did run and drive when I bought it. That said, it did take a lot of work to get it to where it is right now, where I actually feel comfortable taking it out without worrying about it falling apart. And there's still a lot of work left to do to it to get it where I want it. So, stay tuned. As always, hit that subscribe button and enjoy the ride. But first, let's start at the beginning. When I first got the car home, it was pretty dirty, so let's get it cleaned up and see exactly what we're looking at. Subscribe. It wouldn't even be a T-top car if it didn't leak in at least one spot, now would it? With things cleaned up, it really doesn't look bad from a few feet back. Up front, we've got some peeling clear coat on the bumper, a few dents and scratches in the hood. The sail panel looks like someone repainted it with Rust-Oleum. Passenger taillight has a couple small cracks in it. We've got some more paint damage on the rear bumper. And the deck lid looks like it got the same Rust-Oleum treatment. I don't think this trim should be coming off either, but it's not bad by any stretch for a 25-year-old car, and nothing I don't feel misguidedly confident I can fix if I decide to try my hand at bodywork. Perhaps most awesomely though, it's the last car you could get with T-tops. What do you know? The rear hatch struts still work, and someone was nice enough to leave me the factory steering wheel and airbag, which is great because I really don't like the Grant wheel that came on it. Pretty small. I'm supposed to be able to put my T-tops down here, but that subwoofer is clearly in the way. it'll have to go, and this piece isn't even attached, so that makes it easier? Not sure what this license plate is about, but I'm guessing it might be covering a fuel pump access hole. I'll just leave that alone for now. I don't exactly hate it. The headliner has certainly seen better days, but it's also only really bad around the edges. So while I will address this eventually, it can definitely wait for now. What I am going to address now are the air vents. The driver's side vent is just fine, the middle ones are broken, and the passenger side is completely missing. You can still buy replacements, but they only come in black and are only really meant to fit the center, so I'll start by replacing those. There's really no way to get 25-year-old 90s GM plastic out without breaking it, so that's what I did. Suction! The new vents just pop in, at least in these spots. But now the colors don't match, and remember I don't have a passenger vent at all, so I do have to replace the others too. The new vent is too small for the hole on the passenger side, but that's easily fixed with some adhesive-backed foam from Amazon. Let's trim it to fit. And now the vent stays, but it's still unsightly. I got some black rubber edge trim, which I glued in place to hide the foam. I didn't like this gap at the bottom, so I filled it with some leftover black RTV. It may not be perfect, but it's a lot better than no vent at all. The driver's side vent is a little different. It sits directly in the gauge bezel with no separate plastic trim on the outside. After removing the gray one, the black replacement is too small to fit in its place. It looks like the outer ring will fit inside if I remove any unnecessary obstructions. With a little bit of lubricant and the help of a hammer, I almost got it seated all the way back. A heat gun softens things up just enough to complete the process. To be honest, I'm amazed I didn't break the plastic. I gave it the same rubber trim as the other side, and it matches the rest of the Fisher-Price interior of this car well enough. And on the subject of 90s GM plastic, the dash pad is broken, as it is on every 4th gen, and so is the passenger door panel. The driver's side is okay for now, but the switch trim is cracked and has been screwed in place. Thankfully, all the buttons still work, most of the time, and a new one will cover any screw holes. The passenger side window, though, is very slow, especially near the top. The console lid is pretty broken and definitely won't support me resting my rather significant weight on it, and the ashtray has been glued shut. Sometimes I hear something rattling around inside, so I'm pretty sure that's broken too. The top of the windshield has this annoying tint on it. I'm tall and it screws with my field of vision, so let's get rid of it. Applying heat. There's one spot up at the very corner tippy top where the tint is already starting to peel away just enough for me to get the pliers up there as a substitute for my complete lack of fingernails. And there we go. Now I've just got to pull with nice even pressure and try not to rip it. You know, this is actually kind of satisfying. And as a bonus, hopefully now I won't have to slouch so uncomfortably just to see out the front. Now that I've gone over the cosmetic stuff, let's pop the hood and see what horrors await us there. Aside from some missing fuse covers, it's a bone stock 3800 and it's going to stay that way at least for the time being. And before you guys fill up the comment section, I already know, despite being happily married for 14 years, I'm never getting laid again because of my small Johnson and V6 F-body. There's definitely oil in it, and the level's right where it should be. The coolant, though, seems to have a problem. It shouldn't be brown, and there should be more of it. Looks like it's been leaking out of this hose, especially since there's Dexcool residue all over this side of the engine bay. But hey, the water pump is new, and at least one of the coolant elbows has already been replaced. Let me get in there with my inspection camera. Both of them are metal, so that's a win, I guess. When I first looked at the car, it had an EGR code in history, but no active check engine light, and it passed emissions. Definitely looks like the valve was replaced at some point to fix that. Not sure what exactly this wire is about, but I can't exactly have it draped over the engine like that. It looks like it goes to the fan relay and is probably important, so let's go ahead and reroute it. Whatever that was for, it definitely wasn't going to hold up long term, as it was just two wires twisted together under some tape. Maybe I should disconnect the battery before going any further? What's already there isn't long enough to go around the engine, so I'll splice on another piece. It's green to match what's coming out of the fuse box. I prefer this nylon wire loom in places where I can easily use it. You just sorta inchworm it on and all the way back. We'll go through this AC bracket, in front of the radiator, over the river and through the woods, and connect it back to the fuse box. And it's fixed. Let's add a bit of heat shrink and tape for good measure. Can't forget the zip ties. With that particular hazard dealt with, I can go ahead and start the engine. There's definitely a lot of power steering noise, but the exhaust isn't bad for a V6. After giving it some revs, the coolant leak became very apparent. That's obviously a problem, so let's go ahead and address it. The coolant reservoir is right under the battery, so let's get that out of there. Unclip the offending hose, unvoltage, unclippage, and the reservoir can be removed. That looks like the kind of stuff that comes out of my camp toilet and definitely needs to be cleaned out before putting the reservoir back. That's about as clean as it's going to get. I did notice a bit of damage to the battery tray, but I don't have a new reservoir, and as far as I can tell, it's just cosmetic. The coolant tank itself looks to be a separate piece, they're just kind of stuck together. The hose is just a friction fit inside this grommet, so with a bit of wiggling and pulling, it came out.
That's nasty.
The replacement hose came with a new grommet, so I popped the old one out. And with a bit of persuasion, the new one went in. I could then install the new hose. After putting everything back where it belongs, filling the reservoir with water is just fine, since I'm definitely going to be flushing the entire system soon in light of the nastiness I just saw. After starting things back up, there's a bit of a whooshing noise from what I think is the alternator. And maybe the slightest bit of belt squeal. But it's charging good, has great oil pressure, and the temperature is starting to warm up. Even the AC works. Right around 40 degrees at idle is exactly where we want to be. I did notice that on the freeway the temperature never even made it to a fourth, so I might need a thermostat. Given the condition of the radiator, I'm sure it's full of crud and stuck open. That about does it for the things I can check out from the top, so let's get this car up in the air and take a look at the underneathy bits. I did get one of these quick jacks as a Christmas present to myself. Not sponsored. Yet. Sad face. And let me tell you, it's a huge improvement over a jack and jack stands, especially with how many times I've had to lift this thing up in the air. If you're on the fence about one, I do highly recommend it, and I also suggest adding some sort of casters to the bottom to make positioning them easier. There are plenty of videos out there with various suggestions on how to do that. This garage is almost too small. The only solution might be to build myself a shop. But first, I need to satisfy my OCD tendencies by replacing every broken, missing, and corroded clip and screw on the front bumper. Is this strictly necessary? No. Does it make me feel better? Absolutely. And what are we if not slaves to those electrochemical impulses traversing the gray matter between our ears? Anyways, moving on before this becomes Zen in the art of F-body repair. There's definitely some major drippage on the steering rack. It's not coming from the oil filter, so I originally thought it was this hose here, but it looks like it starts higher up from the pump itself. That'll need to be replaced. I was told by the previous owner that I had a rebuilt engine, and sure enough that is the case. I'm guessing intake gasket failure, since that's about the only way you can kill one of these 3800s. The gaskets are, of course, new, but it looks like they cheaped out and used the plastic ones that'll just fail again. If I ever end up doing work on that part of the motor, I'll probably go ahead and change them out. That's called foreshadowing. Moving a little further back, these wires look like they got a bit too close to the exhaust, but they still seem functional, so I'm just going to relume them. I'm using this cloth wire harness tape, which I learned about on Rain Man Ray's channel, and it's actually a huge improvement over the regular plastic stuff. I'm sure it'll hold up to the heat from the exhaust much better. Of course, the best way to deal with that is to keep the wires far enough away from the exhaust in the first place, so for this side, a simple zip tie will be adequate. But there's no place for one over here, so I had to get creative with the spare metal strap I had left over from installing our mini splits and made a hanger. That looks factory. I do appear to be missing a bell housing bolt, so in my infinite wisdom, I went and got a replacement before making sure that there were actually threads in the hole, which there aren't. Oh well. I may as well take this opportunity, though, to address the bowed-out fenders. This happens on these cars when someone jacks them up by what they think is the pinch weld instead of the jack point behind it. The first step towards fixing it is to straighten out this mounting tab. These bolts will have to come out anyways, and removing them now helps me see what I'm working with. I went ahead and cut off the damaged section of fender, for which a hacksaw worked far better than tin snips. And with more room to work, forcibly straightened the tab between a couple of thick steel bars. I could then cut out a piece of sheet metal, but if you don't have any, I've seen someone fix this with a piece of bed frame. Bend it into an L shape. Drill 2 1/4-inch holes on the short side to match the holes in the mounting tab on the car. And 2 more holes on the long side that will be used to secure it to the fender. I then pushed the fender into its desired position and marked the location of these holes onto it, and drilled them out oversized while welding bolts into the matching holes on my bracket. I painted it black to match the rest of the car, and bolted it to the tab that the fender previously attached to. The oversized holes allow for some adjustment, and once things lined up, I could secure it with nylon lock nuts and fender washers. Ironic that I'm using fender washers to secure a fender. Although it certainly wasn't as bad, at least on the part you could see, I did go ahead and fix the other side as well. It did have the added bonus of fixing a rubbing issue that I thought was a problem with the door hinge, but ended up just being because the fender was out of alignment. Moving a little further back to the exhaust, where do I even begin? I think it sounds decent once it's warmed up, but that's about all I can say. With all the leaks and terrible quality welds, I could almost fool myself into thinking that I worked on this before. Seriously? What is that? And this is just shoved in there, it's not even connected. I almost considered trying to save it until I saw that this pipe had a nice crack going through it, and the tips are pretty messed up on account of the previous owner backing down a relatively steep driveway. And how does this even happen? Oh well, at least I can fix that last one. Let's engage our catalyst support apparatus and unbolt the bracket from the car. This is very thin metal and I'm by no means a welder, but if I dial down the power and try to keep moving, I should be able to keep from burning through. Yeah. I tried to fix it by filling in the hole with more weld and grinding it smooth, but that didn't work, so let's take a different approach and try bolting it back together. In the words of someone you might have heard before, I'll be dipped. That actually worked, and it might even be stronger than it started out. After a bit of high-temp barbecue paint, it was time to put things back together. Hopefully the extra metal means that this piece is never gonna break again. Never gonna break again, never gonna fall apart, just gonna hold your catalytic converter. It's getting close to the end of this video, but before I go, let's go ahead and check out the old pop-up road illuminators. They're definitely illuminated, but they're all orange and incandescent, and we just can't have that in 2024. When I first got the car home, but before I actually filmed this part, the high beams didn't work, but after taking the steering column apart in a future video, they started working again. I'll take it. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. But the fog lights work. The front turn signals don't, but that's not exactly uncommon on these cars since GM decided to use them for running lights as well, and the bulbs got hot and cooked both themselves and their connectors. Finally, I'm not sure how well the camera picks it up, but the passenger side taillight is definitely a lot dimmer than the driver's side. That's because moisture got inside, probably through these cracks in the housing, and corroded the reflective material. It's fixable, but that and any other repairs will have to wait for the next episode. So leave a comment below if you want to criticize my decision to buy this money pit, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Thanks for watching!